Welcome to Gray Eminence Media. I have a good one for you guys. Let's get into it.
Well, I'm delighted to say I'm joined now by the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan. Mr. Mayor, good to see you.
It's been too long, Piers. I'm just only sorry we're not doing this in person, but it's lovely to be with you again. Although the first time on your new show. Well, it's not new anymore, is it?
Well, it's not new, and you have resisted my advances for quite some time. So what's made you finally succumb?
Well, I think, to be fair, we were trying to hook something up a few weeks ago, but you were very busy doing stuff overseas, and I'm just really sorry it's taken so long. Hopefully next time it'll be in person.
Well, I would like that. We've always, I think, had a robust exchange of views over the years. Let's start with the obvious subject, which is your campaign about air quality in London. I want to preface this part of the interview by saying that I have gone through a quite interesting journey, I think, about pollution in London. So I thought I had a big issue with hay fever for quite a few years, and eventually had a lot of tests done, revealed no allergies at all, and then had a local chemist who said to me, I think it may be pollution. Is it worse when you come back from overseas? I went, actually, yes, it is. And it was knocking me out for like half a day every week. And he recommended getting some air purifiers and getting an air quality app and not going out too much when it was very high. I did both those things. I've got 4 purifiers in my house now, £80 each, and it's completely transformed my health. I'm a different human being in the last 8 months to what I'd been like in the previous few years. I then did some digging into the borough I live in, Kensington and Chelsea, and discovered, to my horror, that it's one of the worst places in the country for air pollution, and that there's a lot of people who die from pollution-related deaths in Kensington and Chelsea. So I'm a convert to your cause. I believe it is a real issue. I've been through an experience myself that's made me see the benefit of having better quality air, albeit through purifiers. But here's the problem that I think you've encountered. It's a similar problem to the Just Stop Oil protests, where I agree with their cause, but I don't agree with the methodology. And it seems to me that your ULEZ scheme, albeit well-intentioned, and I think we all want to get to where you want to get to on air quality, but it's turned out to be incredibly divisive. You know this, very polarizing. The polls actually show it's pretty split down the middle about what people's views are. Perhaps if you live in the outer part of London, more extremely against it than those who live in the inner part of the city. But it is very divisive and it is very controversial. Do you have any regrets about the methodology?
Well, Piers, can I first thank you for the thoughtful way you've asked the question, because I, like you, went on a journey. In 2014, 2015, I had no idea about what you've discovered either. I was feeling out of breath when I was playing football. I was getting tired very quickly. I had some really bad days where I was wheezing and coughing, and I'm, like you, reasonably well informed. Think I know a bit about things like air pollution, air quality, climate change, but I had no idea that this invisible thing we can't see, particulate matter and nitrogen dioxide, was making us sick. And so the evidence in relation to the consequences of air pollution, you and I are living out, but also in our city, around 4,000 people die prematurely because of air pollution across our country, according to government figures, not mine, government figures, between 28,000 and 36,000, and at least to children having stunted lungs forever, and adults like you and I with a whole host of health issues, from asthma to cancer, dementia to heart disease. But also, Piers, to answer your question directly, I've seen the evidence of the ULEZ in central London where it exists and in London where it exists. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. So we introduced the ULEZ in central London and saw within a year an almost 50% reduction in toxicity, but also a third fewer children with air pollution related illnesses being rushed to hospital, a third reduction. We expanded it to inner London and we saw a further 20% reduction in air pollution, and children going to 1,400 schools were breathing cleaner air. But let me show you the problem. It's in outer London that's the worst air. The 10 boroughs with the largest amount of premature deaths are in outer London. What we've also seen is that 24 of the 30 GPs with the worst number of patients is in outer London. So that's the aim. But what I've tried to do also, Piers, is to listen to the genuine concerns. And I recognise, by the way, Piers, in relation to regret, over a number of years in outer London, we haven't got the good quality public transport we've got in central London and inner London. So more people are relying on cars in outer London. The good news, 9 out of 10 cars now driving in outer London are already compliant, won't pay a penny more, but we'll see the benefits of.
Yes, of course, cars in the area of outer London are going to be more prevalent, right? Because, I mean, if you're working in the city of London, which is an actual separate entity from London, people don't really need cars all that much, right? So this isn't a news flash.
Clean
Yeah,
air.
but here's okay.
And
But
my final point is we're now-
I don't want to get into arguing about the merits of what you're trying to do, because I actually
Thank you.
broadly agree with it.
Sure.
On the methodology, it seems to me, here's your problem
Yeah,
in
the
a nutshell.
methodology, and let's get to
I
it.
have an Aston Martin, right? A very luxurious car. I'm very lucky to have it, lucky to earn enough money to be able to keep it up. And you don't charge me a penny to drive that around London as much as I like, because I'm ULEZ compatible. But if I lived in North London, in Wembley or somewhere, and I was a hardworking guy, woman, and you're driving a van maybe for work and you have to come into town every day, and you're already facing massive cost of living, extra costs for your family, you're struggling to feed your family, you're really feeling the pinch. And now suddenly you, who really can't afford just to get through the day as it is, are suddenly having to pay another £12.50 every day to you. Why am I being spared just because I can afford to have a more expensive ULEZ compatible car? And why are a large number of people who are having to pay actually at the poorer end of the spectrum of London society? That is where your optics,
Let's see what he says. Let's see what he says.
So because your car is US compliant, it means it's Euro 4 or better. What that means, Piers, is when you drive your car, your wife may be next to your daughter in the back, they're not breathing in poison the same way somebody driving a non-compliant car is. That's the first point. The second point is what we're doing is to support the hardworking van driver you talked about, to support the low-income family you're talking about, to support the charity with the minibus you may be talking about. We're giving financial support to the tune of £160 million. So a small van owner, a small business with a van like yours, will now receive support, £7,000 to get a ULEZ compliant van. You don't need to, by the way, buy an electric van.
USA, let's go.
If you've got a car, you don't need to buy an Aston Martin. And the good news is there are ULEZ compliant cars, vans and minibuses available. And so the scrappage support we're given, without a penny of support from the government, who are giving support to cities around the country with their clean air zones, means that person you're talking about, who I understand will be anxious, will have the support to make the transition.
Well,
here's the point.
Yeah, but I've heard
they breathe clean air.
Okay, but I've heard all the phone-ins, and a lot of them are furious. They're not just concerned about this; they are furious at what they see as a punitive tax on the poorer people in the city. And also, why are they being picked on as how they see it? And my argument again about the Just Stop Oil campaign, you've got to bring people with you. At the moment, you've got half of your city, and you're the mayor of the whole city. You've got half of the city up in arms about this. They're attacking the ULEZ machinery in the streets, which I don't support. They shouldn't be doing that. There's a lot of blind rage about this. I've heard the phone-ins on the radio. What are you going to do about this growing anger? Because you may be right in your cause. I believe you're right about trying to get better air quality. But you know that the Labour Party are very concerned about it. I want to play you a little mashup of what Labour figures have been saying about it.
I don't think there's any doubt that ULEZ was the reason that we lost the by-election in Uxbridge. And I have said we should reflect on this, including the mayor. I've spoken to him, as you would expect. And so there will be that reflection.
The cost is a problem. And if you look at who pays ULEZ, it tends to be poorer families and smaller businesses. I'm afraid that the hard truth is a £12 an hour, or sorry, £12 a day fee costs Labour that by-election.
There is a massive cost of living crisis at the moment, and asking people to shell out thousands to buy a new vehicle or pay £12.50 every day to go on the road is just an expense too many.
Now, these aren't Tories saying this. This is your own side. They think that this is an election liability. How would you feel if you go down this path, you dig your
Ooh.
heels in as you're doing, you keep going,
Okay, let's
but
see.
it ends up
Let's see what he
potentially
says.
becoming an election deciding issue
He's going to
in the
deflect.
next year or so, whenever that general election may come, that the Tories use this as a weapon to actually defeat you. Then Labour doesn't win power to do all the other things it wants to do, not least of which, including the environment.
Well, let me respond, if I may, please, Piers, to the various points you've made and deal with each of them. So the first point I'd make is you very generously and rightly said that in central London, people support ULEZ and in inner London, but there's some concern in outer London. I would argue the reason why people in central London and inner London support the policies because they've seen it bedded in and they realize it's not as bad as they feared it was going to be. I'll give you some breaking news. When I announced the Central London policy, people were against that as well initially until we had a scrappage scheme and they saw the benefits were far better than the disbenefits. And the point I make is this, when I began that journey, Piers, only 44% of cars in the whole of London were compliant. So the majority would have been losers. Now that figure in inner London is 97% of compliance. In outer London, on an average day, 9 out of 10 are compliant. That's the first point I would make with respect. The second point I would make is in outer London, there's been a lot of misinformation, but also some genuine anxiety because people think they'll be caught when in fact they won't be caught. And so the really good news is on an average day in outer London, 9 out of 10 cars seen driving are already compliant. They don't pay a penny more, but see the benefits. And because I've been listening, you played, I can't see, but you played, Keir, Wes and other colleagues in the Labour Party. Because I've been listening, not just to them, but to Londoners who want to see better public transport, 4 million kilometres of new buses in outer London, a new Superloop bus in outer London, Elizabeth Line extended to east and west of London, the DLR now extended, but also a scrappage scheme. So every single Londoner, car owner, motorcycle owner, van owner, minibus owner who may be affected now get support.
But they're saying they're not getting enough support. And my other question to you about that would be, why, if the government has helped out other cities up and down the country, why have they not helped you out?
Well, I think this goes to the core of the anger you're talking about, which is basically the government thinks because of Uxbridge and Ruislip that actually tackling climate change and tackling air pollution are vote losers. And so they've weaponized this as an issue. And so they're giving people the impression around the country that there's a ULEZ coming too. But I'm quite clear, what's right for London may not be right for Luton. What's right for Bermondsey may not be right for Burnley. And so what the government is doing is weaponize this as an issue. And what I'm keen to do is to listen to the concerns people have, and they're genuine concerns, many of them, and try and address them. But I say again, this was a difficult decision, but I think it's a vital one and the right one.
But are you likely, in view of the pretty extreme reaction from half of your people in London, are you likely to evolve this policy and reflect their concerns?
Yeah, we will always listen to Londoners. So I'll give you just 3 examples. In January, when I announced the policy, it was because I listened to the consultation. People were saying, I'm a low-income family. I got a small business, employ less than 10 people.
I ain't gonna lie, the mayor's holding his own. I was expecting more from Piers. Come on, Piers. Let's get going. Come on.
I'm a charity. I'm disabled. So we gave support in January to those people. In July, I expanded the support to every single family in London receiving what's called child benefit. That's about 800,000 people. But you're right, they were still concerned, which is why the first week of August, I said every single person in London, it doesn't matter how much you earn, you will get support in relation to the scrappage scheme. And the reason why the government's not giving London support, they're giving Birmingham support and Bristol support and Bath support, is they think by attacking Londoners, they may do better at the general election. So Londoners are pawns caught in this crossfire. What I'd say to the government is, grow up, work with me to support Londoners, whether you're a family, whether you're a charity, whether you're a business. Nobody wins if people are dying prematurely. Nobody wins if kids have stunted lungs.
True, but nobody wins if half of the people in London hate you because they think you're targeting the poorer members of society over people like me.
I've got to be frank, Piers. You asked the question at the top of this interview, which was, why am I on this show? I've got to be honest. One of the reasons I'm on this show is because I recognise many of my voters, watch this show, and I'm keen to talk to them through you, Piers. You ask me the tough questions that they ask me, and I respond to as well, because I genuinely think that once people see the benefits of this policy, they'll come with me, as they did in central London, as they did in inner London. But also, Piers, I spent time on Great Ormond Street speaking to kids with stunted lungs. I've met the doctors treating kids at the Children's Evelina Hospital.
Yeah, that's
I've met a
horrible.
bereaved mum. I myself, listen, when I have an asthma attack, I know what to do. I take my pump, I take my tablets, I'm in control. Imagine being a kid with an illness that's preventable by tackling air pollution. Air pollution is not inevitable, it's preventable.
Well, listen. Like I said at the start, I'm with you about the problem of air pollution. I've seen it myself. I've seen it to my own health. So I'm with you on that. I just think that you've got to understand, I think, the scale of concern. I think you probably do. You've been mayor a long time. I think you understand a lot of people are very angry about this. And hopefully there will be some compromises to be had. But let's move on to some other stuff in the news today. Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, who many people are very angry with because of this crisis over schools being closed because of the concrete that had been used to build them, and were blaming the government for not acting sooner. She responded like this, off mic, in an interview today with ITV.
Thank you. Does anyone ever say, you know what, you've done a good job because everyone else has sat on their and done nothing? No signs of that, no?
Do you feel this is a good moment, Mr. Mayor, to tell the Education Secretary she's done an effing good job?
I'd not seen that until just now. Look, I mean, for those that don't know, we had a conversation before we went on air. That's, you know, so you can be caught out with, you know, hot mic, as they call it. But I think the problem is, I mean, the arrogance in relation to, you know, thinking you should be getting a pat on the back. I spent Friday speaking to really worried parents who didn't know whether their kids are going to school on Monday, whether they had to organise childcare. My sister's a teacher, as is my sister-in-law. They had no idea whether their schools are affected. I was also an MP in 2010, lobbying Michael Gove and the government, saying, for goodness sake, please don't cut the program you're going to cut, the Building Schools of Future program that Ed Balls had announced. And, you know, austerity has consequences. And I think Gillian Keegan needs to understand children are caught in the crossfire because of government cuts for the last 13 years. And rather than asking for a pat on the back, she needs to be working night and day to make our schools safe. And it, you know, it is a problem, the fact that literally, forget our public services crumbling, literally our schools are crumbling.
Yeah, I completely agree. I thought it was unbelievably arrogant and tone deaf. Let's talk about women, because she's a woman. What is a woman, Mr. Mayor?
Well, I asked that question knowing full well that people may be watching this who may have gender dysphoria and may, you know, have concerns in relation to this issue. So let me be quite direct in relation to this. So a woman, when it comes to biology and sex, is an adult girl. But there are some women who may have gender dysphoria, and, you know, trans women can also be women as well.
Right. So how do you feel, for example, about the issue of trans women in women's sport, which many, including me, think is grotesquely unfair?
My starting point is dignity and respect, but it's a fact. When you look at the science, there is a massive advantage in relation to some sports. If you have been through puberty, for example, as a boy/man, and then, you know, change your gender then. So I think it's right that the sporting authorities look at the science, look at the evidence, because it's a massive advantage.
So would you ban trans women and have them compete in either their own category or perhaps against their biological sex?
I think it depends on sport. I'll give you an example. You know, I suspect it may not impact performance in relation to darts or snooker. It clearly would in relation to the 100 meters. So I think each sporting authority has got to start from the basis of, you know, dignity and respect and protecting trans people, but then realise that in some sports there's clearly a massive advantage in relation to biology.
I mean, it's become bizarrely a hot issue. This, many people tripping up over trying to categorise what a woman is. You've defined what a woman is, which is good to see. Keir Starmer said that 99.9%, I think he's up to now, of women don't have penises. What percentage do you think it is?
I'm not going to apply a percentage. What I do know is
well, you know why I'm asking? Because most women watching would say actually 100%. 100% of women don't have penises.
No, sure. Well, I was speaking to people who work in the domestic violence sector a couple of weeks ago, and trans women, are on the receiving end of domestic violence, domestic abuse.
But nobody. See, this is. I've heard people try and distract the conversation like this. The thing is,
my point being,
I don't dispute that, and I absolutely, to be clear, I want trans people to be treated with humanity, with respect, and with fairness and equality.
I know you do.
My issue comes where trans rights start to.
The mayor's doing a good job. The mayor's he's holding his own.
The problem is.
I'm a little bit surprised.
I was going to say, Piers, forgive me, is that, and those trans women who are at the receiving end of domestic violence, may have had a penis, is the point I was going to make. But similarly, I know, there are some places that are protected for single sex (brackets biology). So these are complicated issues, and that's why I don't want to be flippant.
It's not. It's really. It's actually not that complicated, is it? I mean, I think if you start from a position, there are men and women, and then there are trans women and trans men. If you just articulate it like that, there's not a problem. It gets complicated when people try and pretend that biological males are women. They're not.
I think there's biology and then there's gender, isn't there? And the point I was trying to get across is that that I'm aware it's very difficult if you're somebody who's trans, you're going through this, and so what I'm trying to do is be sensitive to that, but recognizing, as you've asked me to do, of some of the challenges when it comes to sports, particularly those sports where your sex does matter when it comes to performance.
I mean, at City Hall, you have a weird series of rules that have been laid down. You don't like gender-specific phrases like ladies and gentlemen to be used because it may exclude non-binary people. What if somebody wants to be called a lady or a gentleman? British Airways have done this too. And I'm like, hang on, when I get on a plane, I actually quite like to be called a gentleman. Where are my rights to still be called a gentleman?
Well, I'm not sure about that, about that being City Hall rule. What I can tell you...
Well, my self-categorization, anyway.
Well, no, I love days when I'm called a gentleman, but I think what it may be is, somebody may have said friends or people or Londoners, I don't know, but no, nothing is banned.
The mayor is holding his own.
That I've been present for in City Hall, they've said, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, stuff. So I'm not sure about any words being banned, Piers, and
Piers Morgan has not
it's
destroyed
an advisory.
The
it says, for example, migrants shouldn't be called illegal, even if they're illegal migrants. They should be called insecure immigration status people or undocumented. But frankly, if they're illegal,
I can deal with that.
Yeah, but if they're an illegal migrant, they're an illegal migrant. Why do you care what the phraseology is?
Let me deal with that. So when you're an asylum seeker coming to the UK, there are now no safe routes to come to the UK. And what the government has done is outlawed, made it criminal offence to come to the UK for asylum seekers. So many asylum seekers who come to the UK may be defined as illegal migrants because of the government passing this law, which isn't law in other countries, but they are asylum seekers who go on to become refugees, many of them Great Britons, once they've secured their status. I think that's what it may be referring to.
My general view about this, I guess, is that there seems to be a lot of energy going on. At government level, in the NHS, we've seen it with, you can't say mothers, you have to say birthing parents, all this kind of thing. And I don't like it. I don't really understand it. I don't know why all language has to be changed just because there is a minority of people who may or may not be offended by not being included in every terminology. Ultimately, a mum wants to be called a mum. A dad wants to be called a dad. A man wants to be called a man. A woman wants to be called a woman. A boy, a kid, a girl, a girl. Why do we have to have all this gender neutral language brought in, which stops all those words being used in officialdom? Why can't we just keep it the way it was? And if people don't like it, well, okay, I'm sorry, but you're not going to get everything you want in life.
Yeah, I suspect some of the reasons for people being cognizant about the consequences of language is how it's received. And so I grew up at a time where it was common for people like me to be called the P word, or for black people to be called the N word, or my Jewish friends to be called the Y word. And we now accept, we used to call it then, people would criticize that, call it politically correct. But that political correctness led to, me feeling a safe space to go out and about, literally a safe space, but also because Londoners are so brilliant, they've elected someone like me, an ethnic minority and a religious minority, to be their mayor. So this inclusivity does lead to progress in many, many ways.
Wow.
But I accept sometimes it's ridiculous. I was told recently that somebody can't use the word blackboard because that may be offensive to black people.
Stupid,
I've never met a black person. I've never met a black person offended by the
of
word
course
blackboard.
Not. They're offended by people thinking they may be offended.
As a Muslim, no, but also as a Muslim, I regularly send Christmas cards. In fact, I used to have a Christmas card competition every year as a member of Parliament. So I don't say season's greetings. I say Happy Christmas. So often I think it's
You've actually sent me a
well-intentioned
Christmas card in the past.
There you go. There you go.
Although I noticed
even after you're beastly towards me.
Couple of quick ones before I let you go. The American presidential election. I've got Vivek Ramaswamy on, who's the rising star of the Republican Party. Did very well in the debate last week. He's on the show tonight. What's your view of him?
Well, let me tell your viewers an exclusive, which I never told you, Piers, but you were there, so you'll know this. In 2016, when I was a baby mayor, you interviewed me with Susanna Reid on your morning breakfast program. And off air, I said to you, what do you think about the Republican primaries and this guy Trump running? And you said to me off air, Trump's going to win. And everyone was saying there's no chance Trump was going to win. So I had a question for you afterwards, off air maybe, or on air. Who do you think is going to win? But I think he's fascinating, this guy. I mean, anybody who, when you get to our age, Piers, wants to rap Eminem, deserves, kudos for doing so. The fact that Eminem may not like it is his point of view. But
are you partial to a bit of rap yourself or not?
No, man. Although you boys were singing Vanilla Ice on
we
Sunday.
Were. Rice, Baby at the Arsenal yesterday.
But no, listen, I'm not. My daughters would be mortified. I'm forbidden to go on Strictly and forbidden to dance in. But this guy, listen, I may not agree with what he's saying, but the good thing about him, he appears authentic. And he's not a politician. I know Trump wasn't a politician, but sometimes you've got to shake things up in relation to saying, calling a spade a spade.
Okay, the mayor's an upstanding person.
So, being frank, you'll be surprised to know. Don't agree with his politics, but I think it's right and proper that during a primary, during a nomination process, you really do test all the candidates. And you remember how the wheels came off some of the Republican favorites in 2016 when Trump entered the race. And I bet you, Vivek Ramaswamy is going to upset quite a few of the established candidates.
Well, I'm sure he will. But of course, by far the front runner in the Republican race remains Donald Trump. You and he have got a pretty checkered history, to put it mildly. You allowed a big balloon of him as a baby to fly over Westminster when he came into town. He's been pretty scathing about you. How would you feel if he is re-elected president of the United States?
Just to give full context, I also allowed a balloon of me with a bikini to fly in London,
which was equally unedifying, I have to say.
So it could have been worse. It could have been me in person with a bikini. What sauce for the goose? But can I say this is my problem with Trump. I've got a number of problems with President Trump, and you and I have discussed this in the past. Is how I felt when he said some of the things about the religion that I follow, how my family felt in America, proud Americans, proud Muslims, about what he said, about women I know, how they felt when he was elected. But you will have seen what happened on Capitol Hill, listen, there's losing with dignity, being magnanimous in defeat. And
the mayor destroys
for those
Piers.
who were agnostic or not sure, should be the
mayor
final straw
of London destroys
to his
Piers
fitness
Morgan.
for office. This is America, for goodness sake. You and I are big fans of West Wing. We look to America as a beacon for democracy, human rights, separation of powers, so forth, the checks and balances. And I think
I don't know about the human rights part, but okay, bro.
sometimes, yes, challenge is good, debate is good, but sometimes people are not fit for office. And I frankly don't think, and I don't want to cause offense to your American viewers and stuff, I do not think Donald Trump is fit to be the president of that great country.
I mean, should somebody who's facing nearly 100 criminal charges, just on basic principle, should they be allowed to be a candidate for president? As the Constitution stands at the moment, he is allowed to be. He could be president and be in prison.
Can I say, one of the wonderful things and the joys of America is due process. And I think it's right that Donald Trump has his day or days in court. I think there is a presumption of innocence. There's a separate discussion about what.
And this is what I'll say, because foreigners do look up to America. Foreign countries do look up to the United States. And the fact that you have a prominent UK public figure, Piers Morgan, and the mayor of London, probably one of the top 10 most powerful positions in the world, both are saying that they personally look up to the US in terms of its power, its separation of branches, right? And so why is it that the Republicans have a monopoly on an America first vision? Democrats need to start using this talking point and try to unite America and using language that involves the word America. It is not a far right um a lot of things need to get going in terms of when you're talking about America, it should be inclusive of everybody. When you're talking about certain aspects of American history is full of different people doing different things, right? So Democrats, I think, need to learn a little bit about patriotism, and I know they are patriots. And I think they do need to implement certain Republican strategies in their arsenal because if they don't, I can see them losing elections for quite a while. The world is getting smaller, right? So now it really is a true competition between nation states because a few hundred years ago, it would essentially be a competition between nation states within a certain geographical area, right? But now it's the entire planet. And who's dominating right now? The US, right? So this America First vision, I believe, really needs to be spread across the spectrum of political parties in the United States if they really want to survive and elect a candidate to represent their party. All right.
Whether somebody who's presumed innocent should be barred from office. I think as a former human rights lawyer, that may be unfair. You're charged with an offence, not found guilty. He later on may be acquitted. I think there's a separate discussion about that.
But if he was
You and I
convicted,
both know.
for argument's sake, if Trump was convicted of a criminal offence before the election, what would your position be then?
Well, surely then you'd expect there to be provision where he's not allowed to stand with a conviction, particularly if it's a conviction to do with what happened on Capitol Hill, particularly if it's to do with a conviction in relation to a dishonesty and so forth. I used to be a lawyer, Piers. If you've got even a minor conviction for dishonesty, the Law Society doesn't allow you to be a lawyer, right? Because you've got client money and so forth and so forth. So I think the president of the United States is not arguably, it probably is, definitely is the most powerful person in the world. The idea somebody with a conviction can be leader of the country beggars belief. But also, let me show you the problem. What message does that send?
Yeah, but also, I mean, he's been doing a good job, the mayor. But listen, you're not American. This is our constitution. This is our laws. And right now, he's eligible to become president. And you have no say so whatsoever about our constitution and our laws and what we think. Because even though you think that, okay, if this person is convicted of this and that, then they should not be eligible to be the leader of the free world. However, over here in the land of the free, we were able to relatively now I say this in relative terms to compare to other countries such as the UK, Sweden, several countries in Asia. There was a vehement strain of freedom fighters in the United States even before the research came out suggesting that COVID wasn't as deadly as a lot of people assumed it was in the beginning of the pandemic. There were a lot of Americans, and essentially America was laughed at for trying to instill freedom during the scandemic. Okay. And America was looked at as a backwards country. Oh, what's wrong with them? Why are they fighting for their freedoms? This is a very dangerous, and even though we look at the mortality rate, it wasn't that dangerous, but this is a very dangerous scamdemic. And so we need to shut down certain things and months, right? Let's just destroy people's livelihoods, destroy people's mental health, destroy generations of human beings that are growing up in a scamdemic and their life has been altered for a significant portion amount of time, especially if they're in their adolescent years. And so, even though this British person has a specific idea of what our constitution should be like, the reason why we are so successful as Americans is because we don't take advice from people like this. Because when we were trying to fight for our freedoms during this scamdemic, the UK and a bunch of other countries decided to shut down. And that spelled a lot of bad experiences for a lot of human beings on that side of the world. And now in 2023, in September, we realize what a scam it was. By the way, this illness is not gone. People are still getting infected by this thing that these two people are talking about. And if it really was such a big deal, the mayor would have on certain protective gear at all times, right? Because it was deadly. The mortality rate was so high, man. Get out of here.
To people across the great country of America and around the globe in relation to no consequences for your action. And one of the great things about justice is its ability to deter others. What message does it send to a future president in relation to how they can behave or not behave?
I do agree with that, though.
All the things I've said, if Capitol Hill isn't in itself a bar from being a future president. And by the way, one of the great things about America, and we've got to recognize this, is that, by the way, America did correct itself in relation to not only the various charges you're talking about, but also the American people deciding to, boot Trump out of office and bring in President Biden. So, good countries with separation of powers, with good constitutions, with a democracy, in the end, right does overcome wrong. And I genuinely, think that, Donald Trump is not a fit person to be president of that great country.
And for different reasons, given the state of him right now, do you feel comfortable if Joe Biden was to serve another 4 years as president, given how often he currently falls over in public and gets his words wrong and looks like he doesn't know what day it is?
Well, look, I want to tell you, the reputation of America, the moment after President Biden was elected was hugely enhanced in relation to how they're perceived. You've seen, you know better than I do, some of the legislation is passed. The Inflation Reduction Act is leading to a stimulus.
Yeah, I'm talking more about his own lack of apparent physical stimulus, that he just doesn't seem physically or mentally up to the task of being president, the most powerful job in the world. And there's still another year and a half to the election. And then if he was to win, another 4 years in office. I don't think any rational person looks at Joe Biden at the moment and thinks that would be a good thing for the free world.
I'm certainly not on top of, President Biden's medical condition. But I tell you this, there are some days when I see our Prime Minister performing, but I think he's not up to the job either.
Oh, Rishi Sunak?
I mean, some of the decisions he makes, come on, he should have sacked Gillian Keegan. You showed me that video. If I was Sunak now and you showed me that video of Gillian Keegan, I'd be demanding she'd be kicked out.
Would you?
His decision to, he was the Chancellor. He was the Chancellor who decided as Chancellor to reject the advice of the Education Secretary and cut the schools budget by a half that was going into repairing the schools and spent half that budget instead.
All right, guys. Well, what do you think? This is pretty interesting. Let me know in the comments below. Take care, and I'll see you next time.